Again, thank you. As we discussed this afternoon, 5 steps to safeguard your business against cyber attacks. This webinar is sponsored by the Bar Association of San Francisco, as well as Microsoft. CloudFirst is a Microsoft partner who is responsible for delivering several MCC or Microsoft Community Connections programs. One of the topics today is what we're discussing right now, the 5 steps to safeguard your business against cyber attacks. So this is going to be a discussion where you're welcome to add any questions that you would like inside of the chat window. If we're able to answer them as I go along, that's fine. But there will be an open forum to ask additional questions after the webinar is complete. Additionally, all those who are present have the opportunity to get a free trial of Office 365 with some of the security features with it. But one person will win a 1-year subscription to Office 365, and we will be doing a drawing after the webinar. So stay tuned for that. A little bit about myself. My name is Dennis Gentles. I am the CEO of CloudFirst Technology Solutions. We are a Microsoft partner. We are a silver partner, and we specialize in cloud services, and we also specialize in security for the cloud and also for any on-premise situation. We are infrastructure cloud experts, as well as myself. I happen to be a serial entrepreneur, running several companies throughout my career, and understanding all in the IT realm, and understanding how important it is to have security when it comes to your data. So let's start with a poll. See if I can bring up this poll. Just to get a little bit of an understanding of the audience and what your background may be or what you may be familiar with. So the first question as part of this poll is, have you ever been a victim of a cyber attack? And if you are logged in, then you would be able to see on your screen, if you logged in through the web portal, you'll be able to see the question. And it appears that no one has actually experienced a cyber attack. So that is good. That's a good thing. We'll move forward, and I am going to go back to our slides. Okay, so when we think about the way the world is changing today, it is changing dramatically. The scene is much different than it was years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, as more organizations are putting sensitive data on their servers. This attack that is out there where individuals or hackers are trying to get into personal data or company data, sensitive documents, legal documents, that is becoming more prevalent as time goes on. Enterprises are being targeted at unprecedented numbers. We find that in 2014, just a couple of years ago, it was a 56% increase, and that increase has sustained itself for the last couple of years as well. Recent attacks on security, we know with Sony, we know Chick-fil-A, Target, these breaches cost millions of dollars. And so there is a high level of concern in the public on how an organization, how can a consumer be safe in giving its personal data to a company, and how can companies, how can enterprises be safe from outside attacks where individuals try to target their sensitive data. So we recognize that this frequency of attack is from a variety of different types of data breaches. There are viruses and worms and Trojans. These types of viruses or these types of security breaches usually destroy data. They go in and the purpose is to go after your data and bring down your network and try to destroy it in some way. There's malware, which is very similar to that, but it is sometimes it presents itself as a piece of software that you need, and it installs on your computer, and you can't get it off unless you pay for something. There's bots. There are web-based attacks. There's just physical having one's device stolen and the data sucked off of the hard drive. There's malicious code where you believe individuals have given you an application or you've downloaded a program that you believe has a noble purpose, a benign purpose, yet it's malicious. When you install it, it tries to suck your data off and subvert it to another location. There's phishing and social engineering, and there's denial of a service attacks. There's many different types, as we see from this particular chart here, and the percentages that they occur, whereas we're seeing viruses and worms and Trojans have a higher frequency. But the point is, we still, regardless of what type of security breach, we want to make sure our organization is safe. And so that's what our discussion is today. So what types of cyber attacks have you experienced? Being that no one has experienced it in our poll, we'll go ahead and skip this second poll. But the top concerns when it comes to, regardless of what type of attack, is the loss of client data. That's the number one concern that individuals have, because especially from in the legal field, if one of your clients trusts their information with you, with your organization, and then that protected, that sensitive information gets stolen while you have possession of it, well then, more than likely, a client will be lost. And even worse than that, reputation will be lost. And so there's high stakes behind losing data that is entrusted to us from someone else, from any of our customers. There's the reputation damage. Another concern is theft of commercially sensitive data, maybe trademarks and patents, things that haven't been actually trademarked or patented yet. That information could be stolen. The concern about the financial loss, the concern about having an interruption of service, maybe loss of revenue. And then, again, intellectual property, maybe engineering work or whatever that an organization may be working on that is not ready for public's usage yet or public information. So those are some concerns that law firms and any organization would be really concerned about, and making sure that their data is safe to avoid these types of things. 60% of all targeted cyber attacks were directed against small and mid-sized businesses. And so this is an interesting fact, because many believe that cyber attacks are really not for the small companies. Hackers really try to target large companies. That is not really the case. In fact, it is easier to break into a small company because many times they do not have the high level of security that some of the larger firms have been able to implement. And the reason for that is many small companies feel that they can't afford it. It's too difficult to hire a security expert, and it's too difficult to hire or to purchase software that's going to monitor it, or having the resources to internally to continue to monitor one's security practices. However, that does not negate the importance, since, again, most of the cyber attacks happen against small and mid-sized businesses. 80% of cyber attacks result in PCI compliance fines. These are things that go unnoticed, that don't actually make the newspapers or the news many times, is that the fines that are associated with a data breach. Especially with PCI, they have some pretty heavy fines. It's in the credit card world, the credit card industry. PCI regulates that. And so what organizations have to recognize is they could have some huge financial impact by not making sure that they are fully secure when it comes to the data that they hold. 60% of enterprise organizations see a 40% short-term loss in revenue when there is a data breach. So these are some alarming facts to consider. Now, Symantec, which is a leader when it comes to virus protection and security from that area, they've stated some best practices for organizations. For instance, you would not want to go without having virus protection software on your systems, on your servers, on your desktops. So you want to be able to have that protection constantly. And then employing strong security measures, having encryption on very sensitive data, and having strong authentication. That means the username and passwords that your users use would be not just simple passwords like password 123, but would be stronger passwords, including, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more as we go on. But the other thing is that you have to have an action plan, and really preparing for the worst, knowing what if someone were to take this sensitive data, what if this particular server got breached, what measures or what things can I put in place to avoid that? We also want to provide ongoing education and training organization for our users. So let's talk a little bit more. There's 5 steps that we're going to discuss on how to secure our businesses, how to help. These things will help us to keep our organization secure. The first thing we're going to talk about is the firewall theory. Then we're going to talk about how to implement stronger authentication. And then we're going to talk about control internal access. We're going to talk about compliance audit, and we're going to talk about how to educate the users. So our first part is firewall. What is a firewall? Well, a firewall is a piece of hardware or software that protects us from the outside world. So if we are connected to the internet, and of course every organization is connected to the internet in some way, well, either through our cable provider, through some other telecommunications company, we have an internet connection. And so what is to stop anyone, since we're connected to the internet, anyone from just going and accessing all of the computers on our network? Well, it is a firewall. Almost everyone, in fact, everyone, has some sort of firewall. Perhaps the router that connects your internal computers to the internet has a piece of software on it that acts as a firewall to protect the internal computers from outside attacks. But how good is our firewall? We really want to be able to understand that, because the firewall is what limits the incoming and outgoing traffic, and it protects on different levels. Most firewalls out of the box is set up so that you can't just simply connect to anything inside of your network, and you have to open holes in the firewall called ports. So for instance, port 80 is the port for web traffic to go through. So if you hosted your own web server inside of your organization, then port 80 has to be open on the firewall so that traffic can go through and get to your web server. And so that's just one example of the different types of ports that may be open. The problem is that if there is a port open that we do not know about, or that we did not verify should be open, and that can cause a security breach. So we want to understand our firewall and understand its configuration, at least to a basic extent, so that we can know. And there's many organizations that offer that type of service to do a security assessment and looking at your firewall and looking to make sure that you are protected from that standpoint. So some of the things that you consider is, what is the cost of the firewall? What are the features of the firewall that you may have in place? Is it strong enough for what you're trying to protect, the type of data that you may be holding? Do you have any type of monitoring in place to even detect if there is a security breach? There is software out there that can tell you that, someone has accessed your network that should not have access to it. And so getting that type of monitoring software is something of course, it's very good. There's also machine learning or an automated systems that go out and they look at the threats or attacks of individuals trying to access your network. Maybe they haven't breached your firewall yet, but it looks and develops trends and sees, okay, well, it looks like that every day during this certain period of time, or from the same IP address out in the internet, there seems to be some type of targeted attack trying to breach inside. So it will discover who's trying to do it, capture their IP address, and you'll be able to take measures ahead of time before the breach actually takes place. So those are some of the things that one would consider in addition to their firewall. Knowing our system, knowing the configuration, as mentioned before, is something that is extremely important. It's imperative to really know what you're dealing with, to know how your network is set up, to have that documented so that you can feel safe. Many organizations hire a chief security officer to work along with the CIO. Now, to have executive level, an officer in your organization, depending on the size of your organization, may not make sense. But the point is to have someone, it may be your office manager, it might be your IT guy, whoever it is, have someone who's responsible for making sure that your data is secure, that has the responsibility of making sure the configuration is set up properly, and who can report back to the president or CEO or the board, those who are leading the organization. The second thing that we're going to discuss is using stronger authentication. What does that mean? Well, authentication is using your username and your password, your credentials, to access the network. Some organizations have a very loose policy. Perhaps users don't even have to log into their workstations. And when it comes to accessing data, perhaps everyone knows everyone else's username and passwords. We deal with organizations all the time where it may be just a few people, a few persons, maybe 5-6 employees, and everybody knows everybody else's username and password. That is good to have a level of trust with your coworkers, but that's not compliant. If there's any type of HIPAA or PCI or SOX compliance that is needed, that's just not compliant, and it's not a good idea at all. So it's important for everyone to have their own username and password, and then the level of authentication is important. And this slide here, if you're able to see it, is single-factor authentication, dual-factor, multi-factor. And single-factor authentication is just having your username and your password. Having additional factors means that you have to put in additional information in order to access the data, in order to log in. We'll talk more about that. Single factor, again, as stated, username and password, you want to make sure that you have you want to have policies in place that ask for a strong password rather than just something very simple as like your name, or having the same password as your username, or something very simple like your birthday or your anniversary. Those are the type of things that people who know you or people can find out with a little bit of digging, and they can crack inside of your system and access your data. So that's the first level, single-factor authentication, username, strong password. But taking it to another level, this is a poll, and I think we'll skip this poll too. Taking it to another level, you want to use stronger authentication by adding another factor to it. So what is another factor? Well, there's different ways that we can use multi-factor authentication. It's usually something that we have, or something that I know, or something that I am. Those are different ways to add another factor of authentication. For example, you may have a security key code. Sometimes banks issue it. I know my bank does. Anytime I want to log in, I put my username and password, then it asks for a key code, and I have a little fob, little device that I press, and it gives me a randomly generated code. And I enter into that code. I enter that code in, and I'm able to log in. So If someone found or somehow got access to my username and password, they still would not be able to log in to get access to my banking information because they do not have the heat code. They do not have that randomly generated code. Other ways of instituting that is having a text message sent to your phone. Put your username and password, you go to log in, and then a text sends to your phone, and you get the number, and then you put that in. That's multi-factor. Someone would have to actually have your username, your password, and steal your phone, and be able to get into and access your phone to see your text messages in order to get into your system. So adding another factor of authentication greatly increases your security. It makes it much more difficult for anyone to be able to just simply hack into the system. There's many other ways in which to add another level of authentication. Some organizations use authentication against the physical device that you may be using. Each CPU inside of a PC or any processor, and even in a mobile phone, has a digital signature. And you can tie that digital signature to your username and password. So someone will physically have to be at your computer that you're using in order to log in and get your username and password. And this type of authentication works in the cloud, it works on premise, and there's many providers. Microsoft provides it, of course. That's why that's why I'm talking about it. This presentation is sponsored by Microsoft, and us as Microsoft partners understand that. But in reality, there are many different vendors that offer this type of support with multi-level authentication that you can use. And it is relatively inexpensive, so even smaller organizations should look into that. We talked a little bit about a random key generator. That's something that can be used for additional levels of authentication. Now, the third point we're going to talk about is controlling internal access. That's extremely important. If you look at your organization, you think of it as being a castle. You want to make sure your castle is secure. No one can't just walk in off the street and go into your castle. You want to protect it. And how do you go about doing that? Well, you want to protect it from the outside with your firewall, but you also want to protect it from the inside. You want to have limited access, restricted areas where individuals, maybe employees of your organization, may be able to access certain types of information, but then there's more sensitive information that only management or only executive management is able to access. And that's very common in an organization. Not everyone has access to payroll records, and not everyone has access to maybe other human resource type of records. But being able to audit that internal control and being able to make sure that the proper security is set on data is something that's very important to as a security method for an organization. Some of the things that one can do from an internal point of view to increase the level of security is, again, allowing access to only certain parts of the network. On machines that are on the network, there could be policies that disable USB ports so that you can't simply take a USB device and copy data onto a USB thumb drive, for instance, or onto a USB hard drive. Some organizations only institute cloud storage. Now, that's a very interesting thing. We're going to talk a little bit more about cloud. A lot of times persons believe that somehow the cloud is less secure, but it's not the case at all. In that one would have to know how to set up the security measures to make sure that it is secure. But certain organizations like the fact that cloud offers you can set it up so that only one computer has access to a certain type of cloud storage, or cloud storage can only be accessed from your internal network and from nowhere else. Or you can set it up where any access to the cloud storage is completely audited, so you know who had access to it. And so having cloud storage gives one more information than having physical USB drives or something like that to store extra data, because you don't have any control over it. The USB drive can be taken from one computer to another computer, and data can be lost. But by keeping it into a centrally located location, it can easily be audited, and you can monitor who has access to your data. Another thing you can do, make sure your Wi-Fi access points are locked down. Some organizations may not look at that, and anyone who passes by can connect, or it may be a really simple password to connect to your Wi-Fi, and thus, when individuals are on your Wi-Fi and part of your network, it makes it much easier for them to hack into other systems that are on your network. Also, account credentials. Continue to change them, not leave them the same. Have a policy in place where one would have to change their password every so often. That includes your servers and your router and other networking equipment. The fourth part that we want to talk about is compliance audit. Now, what is compliance audit? So many organizations are bound by some type of compliance, depending on for a law firm or for attorneys, the organizations that they may be working with, it requires that they also have that same high level of security or high level of compliance that the organization may be bound to. So in the retail industry or many other industries that offer credit card payments, PCI is the regulatory standard for compliance. For those in the medical field, hospitals, medical insurance, anything that has to do with medical information, HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, is the compliance that needs to be observed. Then there's SOX, Sarbanes-Oxley Act. For any publicly traded company, mutual funds, anything that has public securities, that is the act, or that's the laws that surround that type of compliance. So an organization would want to continue to audit to make sure they meet that type of compliance. Each one of these compliances have policies in place and rules that govern the security of data. And there are some hefty fines behind some of these organizations as well. So, taking the time to do an internal audit, a self-audit, or maybe hiring a company to come in and do an audit, that's something that is very important. And many of these organizations that require the compliance also require records to show that you're auditing yourself on a regular basis. So, when it comes to compliance, cloud computing is in all of these organizations. HIPAA, SOX, PCI, they all support cloud computing just as long as there's certain standards are put in place and that certain steps have been done to make sure that that data is secure, just as if you were to have the data on premise. Whether it's in your servers that are in your office or whether it's in the cloud, there's still the same steps that have to be taken in order to make sure it's secure. Unless you physically disconnect from the internet, it doesn't matter whether your data is on premise or in the cloud, it does have the potential to be hacked. However, cloud-based systems usually have a higher level of security around it because they are hosted by organizations that are impelled to have a very high standard of security. And it's also important to look at the organization and what you're using. So, as far as law firms, the U.S. ethics commissions have determined that it is ethical for lawyers to use cloud computing. That has been a heated topic of discussion. Is it all right for attorneys to use the cloud? Some attorneys do, some attorneys don't. But generally speaking, cloud security has advanced through the years, and in many respects, it is more secure than having your data sitting in your office on a server that may have physical access. Anyone who has access to your office may have access to, may be able to break in and actually physically steal data from the server. So, important things to look at. What are the best practices when it comes to cloud computing? Will I have unrestricted access to the stored data? Have I performed due diligence regarding the company that will be storing the data? Have I stored the data elsewhere so that I can access it if for some reason I can't reach it? So those are some questions. These are the right questions to ask when it comes to security in the cloud. Another thing that we can do for compliance audit to help us to mitigate risk is there is data security insurance. And usually this insurance covers data breaches, it covers network security, its privacy policy and media liability, and getting some type of, there's many companies out there that offer this type of service, having a level of insurance just in case there is some type of data breach. And along with that service, many times it comes with some services to help mitigate possible security breaches. So with the compliance audit, we want to make sure that we have a semi-annual on-site audit, quarterly off-site scans. This helps us to make sure that our records are up to date and we can continue to be safe and make sure that we are compliant. Another thing that we want to do is, as we get the results back from a security audit, is to actually put measures in place, put stricter access policies in place. Sometimes it is something that is delayed because of resources. The organization may not feel like they want to put tighter access controls, tighter protocols in place, but taking the steps to do it certainly is a wise course of action. Now, the last step we're going to talk about is educating your users. In reality, that is the number one cause of security breaches, is not having users who are educated. Users who may inadvertently give their username and password to somebody else, not thinking how risky that may be. There was a situation where the heating and cooling system of one particular company was stored on its company's servers. And in order to gain access to this control for the heating and cooling system, you would have to log into the server with the administrative username and password. Well, their heating and cooling had a problem, so they gave the administrative rights to a company, a heating and cooling company who was coming in to fix it. Well, unfortunately, there was an employee, part of that organization, who got access to the administrative username and password, were able to access the security, to the server, bypassing security, and extracted a lot of sensitive data off that server, and then later used it against the company to blackmail them. That is something that happens on a very frequent basis, where rather than simply taking data and then selling it to somebody else or doing something else with the data, frequently hackers go in, steal data, have sensitive data, and then they blackmail the company in which they stole it from in order to get a certain amount of money, $10,000, give us $50,000, and we won't release this data. And unfortunately, that is something that takes place. So it's so important for us to take the steps to secure our data. And as we're talking about now, educating users, making sure that the users, that employees, they close the bank vault, so to say, that have policies in place where if you have laptops or you have desktop computers where those that may be in a public area, it doesn't necessarily have to be in a public area, but just when your users, when your employees leave their desk, maybe to take a break, you want to put a policy in place where they lock their laptops, or something that happens within 5 minutes, it automatically locks, and they have to go back and put their username and password in. That's extremely important. A mobile employee may be at Starbucks, and it walks away gets a phone call and turns his back, well, someone publicly can have access to his computer and very quickly put something in place so that he can extract data or install a piece of software that at a later time it can extract data. So again, educating users, helping them to understand what the policies are and how to create secure passwords and how to go about certain procedures to make sure that the company's data is safe. Certain organizations put policies in place where you cannot install any piece of software. So if malicious software gets installed on it, it won't allow, the system won't allow it unless an administrator installs it. There are many different ways to secure data from endpoints, from PCs, from mobile devices. Policies and software should be in place so that employees who have access to sensitive data via a mobile device, what happens if it's their device and they leave the company? Well, you can't take the device, it's their device, and you don't have any control over what data is on that device because it's their device. How do you control that? Well, there are softwares in place that address that, where you can put a container on the mobile device, and that container, inside of it is company-sensitive data, or company data in general, whether it's sensitive or not. And then if someone were to leave the company or depart from the company for any reason, well, company administrators will be able to suck the company data off of that device very simply, very easily. And so those are some of the software packages that a company would want to look at to increase the level of security that they may have, as well as ensure safety of their data. So in educating one's users, that is an extremely important piece of the puzzle. So we've had the opportunity to discuss the 5 steps in which you can safeguard your data. And if there's any questions, you can open it up. We open it up for these questions. You can put it into the chat window, and I'll be happy to answer them. We also invite all to stay because very shortly we will be choosing a winner. We have a randomly selected application that will choose out of the attendees who will win 1 year subscription to Office 365. So again, we thank you for attending. And if you don't have a question now, but you may have a question later, on the screen is my email address, egentles@cloudfirstinc.com. You can send me an email, and I would be happy to answer any question you may have about cloud security or even products that you could use to ensure that your organization is secure. So, just a moment. Who's on the call will be announcing who the winner is. The other thing I would like for you to remind everyone of is when you join this particular web conference, you may have received an email thanking you for joining. In that is a survey. We certainly hope that you will fill out the survey. Let us know how you enjoyed the information, was it relevant, as well as the survey is in the window here, as well in the chat window. It's also in the email that was sent to you. But please let us know your thoughts and maybe even some ideas on future topics for webinars. So thank you very much for filling out the survey. And